Hello, my dotlings. It is Friday, and I told myself that I was going to get out some content before the end of the week. So here we are, Friday evening, and I am going on my birthday weekend with my hubby to Cleveland, where I will not be thinking about the internet. I may actually turn off my phone for a couple of days. Maybe. Probably. Maybe. I need a good tech detox. Just turn the thing off and put it away. It's good for the psychics. So, before I do that, though, I wanted to get some sort of content out, and I've been meaning to do the Jinxed, hexed, curse thing since it was a trend. It goes around every now and again, so if this video is late, then it's just really, really early. That being said, first of all, I want to say, like, a big chunk of this conversation, I think, I want to totally reframe it for one. Number one, Jinx, Hex, Curse. The Jinxes, I tend to think of, like, almost inherently accidental. Like, they're definitely separate from a curse or a hex. But I've heard curse and hex out in the community, and in fact even in other like YouTube circles, as being almost interchangeable, because like hex being more German descent and curse being more English descent, so like in the practical real world there's not a difference. However, I can see the utility of separating them, because there is definitely a distinct flavor palette difference between I think it's good for delineating different kinds of dark magic going on. Like, we'll start out with a good old-fashioned Jinx, and I generally kind of agree with the internet on this one. Like, it's usually, I don't want to say, the one thing I disagree with the whole argument I've seen on the internet, every Jinx, Hex, Curse video wants to break them down by severity and length, and I just don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true, and I will explain it as we go. But part of it, the mode of being hexed, cursed, jinxed, I think that there are different levels there. Definitely different genesis. Different genesis to each of these kinds of dark magic. I do think, like I said, I think the Jinx is kind of like what we used to call it, the stink eye. And somebody give you the stink eye. They give you that look. But the Jinx is kind of like that. But it can be self-imposed. It can be composed by other people. And this is part of why I think the argument is wrong, because I have definitely seen people accidentally impose a Jinx on themselves that brings them to death's door. And I think a big part of going through a magical awakening process is often breaking down those Jinxes, those kind of core beliefs that we have absorbed from either malicious or negligent ways of thinking from the people around us, from inside ourselves, to the point where they do carry a magical charge. Like, there's the psychological, I love to break it down in like the psychological as well as the metaphysical, because like on a metaphysical level, yes, every time you think a bad thought, you are giving a charge, you are building a negative charge. But also psychologically, if we tell ourselves we're unlucky, we're going to be unlucky. And a lot of times the way to fix that is simply to address it. You can take a lot of power out of a Jinx just by kind of looking it in the eye and saying, this is bullshit. A lot of times that does clear it up, or just simply what I call putting a healing on it. And basically, like, you're just putting positive energy on that. You're trying to understand where it's come from, give it, give the issue some compassion. And a lot of times, no matter how severe, and can be very severe, can still break down. And this is again why I think that our internet framing of the YouTube framing of it being like short and less severe is wrong. Just wrong. Not like wrong as in malicious, but just simply incorrect. While yes, these can be shorter and easier to deal with, they can also be deep-seated. Like, the problem with the jinx is it's often habitual. It is often something that, you know, I saw one time, I had a friend who had a coworker that she really liked as a person, but that person didn't do her job. So she had these mixed feelings about this person. This is my car telling me to turn it off. So she had a lot of mixed feelings about this person. So whenever this person irritated her, she would imagine strangling this person. And the woman started to develop issues with her neck. And also, she would like want to rip her hair out. And so the woman's hair started to fall out. These are pretty severe symptoms, you know. Anything that is like neck pain related, especially if you can't figure out what it is, that can be very frightening. You know, our neck is where our head attached to our body. That's a very important part. The more you know. It's one of those days, y'all. It's one of those days. So, that is part of why I think our framing of it is half correct, half incorrect. And like I said, the best way to deal with a jinx is often just to kind of, to put a healing on it. The way to fix a jinx was, the way to stop that from happening was, you know, inherently for the lady to start doing her work, but that's not really how it works. So when you start to hex somebody like that, you're not actually encouraging them to do what you need them to do. That requires communication, which is often how we can break a hex or break a curse. Or not curse, shit. Jinx, there we go. We're pretending like these are technical terms here, y'all. But yeah. And I do think, like, the jinx specifically we can do to ourselves, but I do believe we can hex and curse ourselves as well. And I want to talk about that. But specifically when I think of jinx, I do think of it being inherently unintentional. Like, either, like I said, negligent mostly. It's a lot of repressed feelings, finding an escape. And let's not pretend like that does not mean it is easier, or that it is going to have less effect, or that it is going to be shorter. All these things when people say jinx, oh, it's just a jinx. No. Dark energy being sent to you is never just dark energy being sent to you. It is something that needs to be addressed. So, moving on to hexes. And this again, like, I would rather talk about the genesis of it. If you're going to go out and do... That's what I meant to do. Right there. And again, the people who are casting... This definitely, I think, is being the first level where somebody is putting it on you. Or you are putting it on yourself. And a lot of times, this is blowback from doing dirty magic to somebody else. Or it is somebody sending something to you. But I think inherently a hex, this is one where I can see where people would feel like it would be more intense and not as long-lived, because it does require the person who's doing it to keep doing it, to re-up that magic. And when I think we do it to ourselves, we do tend to, it tends to be an obsession with somebody else. And I can see where that can quickly devolve into a curse. And I want to explain the difference in a minute, but I want to work on 3 hexes first. I think the hexes too tend to be, like I said, they tend to be directed energy, intentionally directed towards a person. Like, and I've heard some good ones, and this is again where, like, out in the community, the curses, hexes, it's all the same to most people. But I have seen some really, really amazing hexes come from my friends, where they'll get mad at somebody and like, the good old Welsh and Irish curses where they're like, some of the finer Irish curses I've heard from people, like my friends and whatnot, they won't wish anything that evil, but they'll wish things on other people like, I hope his pop is flat every time he goes to take a drink, or that his dog pees in his shoe every night. Things like that. So, like, they can be less intense than a jinx by a lot, depending on how much oomph somebody puts into it, how much desire and force, and also willpower that the person has towards this issue. They do tend to last as long as the person is angry, as long as that person is putting in energy, because that source there, like, you know, for Jinx, the source is unintentional, very much like the evil eye. I think those are kind of akin. Whereas, like, the hex, the source energy is somebody sending it to you, or even you throwing it, backfiring it back onto yourself off of somebody else, but there is an intentional sending of energy there. Yes, I have hexed myself. I don't want to talk about it, but we're gonna anyway. I had a person who was saying mean things about me, and so I cast a spell so that every time they talked shit, they tasted shit. That's all I wanted. I just wanted them. And that's another thing. Like, there are sometimes hexes hit specifically because they are directed energy. Often, and this is especially even with curses, but you can, like, well, hex, you gotta ride through. You send it back, you gotta deal with the energy as an energy source, rather than changing your behavior, like, rather than changing your energy. And I'll explain the difference, I think, between a hex and a curse here in a minute. But, with the hex, you kind of just have to send it back, but it's usually weird and specific. It's not like everything went to crap. It's like specific things have just gotten really outlandishly fucked up. Yeah. Like I said, the one where I cast a spell to make them taste shit every time they talk shit. And their rewards were pretty strong. I did not account for that. I was angry, so I cast this thing like a freaking teenager. Like, I made some inherently bonehead mistakes with this without getting into too much detail. So it bounced back. And my tongue turned black for a couple of days. Like, I drank some really terrible wine. Usually don't have this response to wine. It was the first and only time I drank this wine, because that's often a carrier. Like, there's usually, and sometimes there's a carrier. Like, there's a moment that you can, like, attach everything to that's kind of, that's another thing. Like, you almost kind of accept the energy. It's, I don't know, sometimes. But the thing that kicked it off, it's like the energy will hang in the air until it has something to kind of get at you with sometimes. That's just sometimes. We can talk more about that when I do this, because I want to do this video, like, proper someday. But essentially, my tongue turned black. I thought I had a GI bleed. I felt hungover for like 3 days. I ended up going to the hospital. And I had to, like, work through it. That's kind of a roundabout what I think about hex. And again, this is one of those things, the best way to deal with in dark energy, malicious energy, is to put healing on it. To transform in a way that makes you vibrate at a higher level than the energy that's being sent to you. Or to release the hook. Which brings us to cursing. Curses are almost always, this is one that I think people do kind of get right. Like, if we're going to break this down this way, again, out in the real world, people don't know the difference between a hex and a curse. That is us being all technical and jargony. That is which jargon. But if we're going to do this, let's do this proper. I do see the use of separating curses and hexes, because when I think of a curse and it being more severe, I think of something that actually kind of hooks into you. There's more general malaise, and it tends to be more of a vampiric connection. Like, there's always this drawing back to something. It will pull you into something nasty. There's always this loss of energy. There is a feeling of loss associated with loss of money, loss of time, loss of energy. And while I will say yes, they do tend to be more severe, I won't say they necessarily have to be as long. And a lot of times, and I'm coming at this as if the person who is on the receiving end is innocent here. There's certainly, like, justice spells. This definitely would kind of get into that, because they have to hook onto something inside of you. Like the bounce back that I just talked about, I would almost qualify it as a curse, because I had to let go of my irritation. But even though it wasn't as severe, and I dealt with it, but that was coming from my energy. So that very well could have become a curse if I had not dealt with it, because once it got hooked onto something and starts feeding off that energy and creates an energetic loop of negativity, I think that's when it kind of becomes a curse. And the only real way to get rid of that is to change your ways. Sometimes, like, we're thinking like being trapped with an abusive ex. Just because you got cursed doesn't mean that you're the good guy or the bad guy, or even that they're the good guy or the bad guy, because there's like justified curses and unjustified curses. There's like vampiric curse and then like justified curse, but they both hook onto something in you. Like, the vampiric curses tend to hook onto things like love and compassion and pity. These things that we are giving from. So that we give these people our energy, our time, until we're drained. And that's inherently the difference, is that you're drained. You lose something. You have bad luck. It takes your luck. It takes your time, your energy. And that's the thing, is like a justified curse often either ends with redemption or death. That's the thing about a curse. You have to either alter the part of you that this hook is in. That's inherently it. Like, death is a way to alter that. Let's avoid that. Unless it's justified. I don't know who you are. That was mean. But I mean, I had somebody hook into my compassion, and now it's just, I had to let go a big chunk of my pity for people who put themselves in bad situations, because that is an easy place to hook in a curse. And a lot of times you can tell, because if it's, especially with the vampiric ones, I want to break these down as being two separate, but like two branches. But in some ways it's the same tree, because like you get these like lifelong curses, you get these like multi-generational curses. Like if somebody, for example, the one on Salem, the guy who got crushed with his dying breath cursed Salem. So now he pops up every time there's about to be a disaster. Everybody talks about it. They're keeping that hook alive. They are still, and I do think the energy input has definitely changed, obviously. Like, we're much more open-minded, and now witchcraft is how that town makes its money. So in some ways that curse was a successful one. They had to transform in order to change that curse, and that guy hasn't popped up since the 70s now. I want to script this out. Like, this is definitely something I would love to do, like, a proper video on. Definitely something on, like, vampiric connections, vampiric curses, because, again, you have to transform to get out of it. That's part of why, like, but that's just why I think, like, addiction as being a curse or an attachment. I got some thoughts and thinks. I got some thinks and thoughts on that. So, here's some content for you. Definitely check out Madame Tortuga's Lounge and Chaos Conjure. And I will try to make sure they're on here. I don't know if they are or not. TGIF, y'all. Safe travel and much profit to you.